Hi, I'm Aron, and you're watching Atheist Edge.
Hi, thanks for joining us on Atheist Edge. I'm Sam, and joining me today is speaker and author Aron. And today we're going to be covering some issues related to morality. For many theists who are in the process of learning about atheism or even becoming atheists themselves, one of the most persistent objections and assumptions is that without God there is no objective morality. They might also say that without God there is no reason to be good. Before diving in, I'd like to pose a question for theists and atheists out there who are watching this show. What stops someone from doing something immoral? Just keep that in the back of your mind. Think about it. You can pause the video, write the question down, and think about it. But just keep that in the back of your mind as we go through this next series of questions with Aron here. And as you know very well, before any fruitful conversation can really get off the ground, it's very important to define one's terms. So before getting into it, according to you, what is morality?
Morality would be the way that you conduct yourself in your society, and I would not consider the sexual proclivities that most people identify as being moral issues. If you have a lot of sexual partners, if you don't require that much time before knowing somebody, before you're having sex, these are not issues of morality for me. You know,
Okay.
talking about subjective morality, it is more important to me whether you treat someone criminally than whether you treat someone sexually. The way that you judge people or ostracize people or do acts of discrimination, for example, would be worse than whether you're what is it, easy or quick on a date. You know.
Right.
Yeah, and people will want to make moral issues out of whether somebody wears a miniskirt. Oh, who the fuck cares? I mean, well, that's a wrong question. Obviously, a hell of a lot of people care. And as in Sharia countries, for example, they often have where women have to be completely covered because a man can't be held responsible for his own responses when he sees a woman's hair, for example. And I grew up in Los Angeles. I obviously have a whole different metric. I fully understand that the incredibly gorgeous collection of women can lay down naked with me, and unless there's an expressed invitation of some sort, implied some way, then I know this is still not mine to play with, right? And I can still withhold that because that's what morality is. It's and a lot of people just make misjudgments over that. They do the most, what I would think, immoral things against people while trying to support prudishness, I guess. So in these weird kind of judgments against sexual attitudes or sexual equivalence, maybe.
Gotcha. So you make a differentiation between the rules of sexuality when it comes to morality and certain other rules, like for instance when it comes to say murder or theft or rape and those kinds of things.
Yeah, the best way that I've ever heard it put, and for whatever reason I lack the ability to memorize this correctly, there was a soap opera star, some young gorgeous boy who used the name on YouTube of Theoretical Bullshit, real name Scott Clifton. And he did this video called A Treatise on Morality, which anybody that begins to have this question should see this video. It's about 20 minutes long, but it's worth the watch. It really is. So he talks about an act is moral or good if it prolongs well-being or happiness or health or whatever, or all of these things. And a given act is immoral or bad if it causes harm or suffering or both. I mean, it's a simple way to judge this. Now, mind you, whether you wear a mini skirt doesn't seem to fall into either of these categories. why the hell are we giving people grief over that?
Right.
So,
So, let me ask you, what is the point of morality?
we evolved as a social species. So we have a natural affinity and compassion for our family, friends, and fellows. When you look at things on a population level rather than an individual level, and you start thinking, when you extrapolate that over a great deal of time, and you're looking at the population, not the individual, you realize that what is going to be favored is the people who will make the altruistic decisions for the good of the whole of the group, right?
Okay.
The people who will help out the little old ladies and will watch after the children, even not even their own children, but to watch after other people's children.
Uh-huh.
And then you have the people who are selfish, right?
Okay.
Let's say they have an underdeveloped frontal lobe, whatever the hell the problem is, but they're very Trump-esque in their
All right. All right.
opinion of themselves,
Uh-huh.
right, as being better than other people. And those people tend to be, not all the time obviously, but they tend to be ostracized from that society. Either they're taken out of the gene pool by being executed, or by being banished, or by being imprisoned. So what you end up with is a very strong, naturally selective, evolutionary selective pressure toward people who promote the society, who promote the good of the society, and that means every individual in that, and including other species. So when you look at people who are cruel, how would you know that somebody's going to be cruel to a child? Well, were they cruel to a dog? Same thing. People who are cruel to animals will also be cruel to children, will also be cruel to women, and so forth. These are the sorts of things. And then we isolate those kinds of people. So the way that we became the dominant creatures on this planet, surprisingly, was not due to the fact that we are exponentially more intelligent than any other species in this world.
Okay.
It's because we band together in a way that is better than any other animal does. I mean, I'm sure everybody's seen footage of the event at Kruger. There's a park in Africa called Kruger, where a whole bunch of water buffalo save a single calf from a pack of lions. A pack of lions singles out the weakest and the slowest, the baby of the herd, and they're all going to kill it, except that the herd turns around. And what is 7 lions going to do against 50 buffalo?
Right.
They haul ass is what they do.
Right.
Right. So when you have people doing that, you find that people who have no claws, our claws are diminished to fingernails, our canines are diminished to laughable jokes, really. And we lost the great strength that gorillas and chimpanzees had. There was a mutation that deprived us of this great strength before the mutations that I can identify, by the way, that gave us this huge encephalization and the great intelligence. So there was a time when we were super weak as apes and not super smart. And yet, we still prevailed for one reason only, and that was when the predator arrived and everybody ran and there was a child left alone, somebody notices the child is still left alone, and the entire pack turns to face whatever it is. And that's what makes humanity great. It was before we were intelligent and after we were strong individually.
No kidding. That's a really interesting point, because the idea of as some would say, altruism, or the idea of taking care of those who are in your group who are not as physically strong or mentally capable. That idea seems to be a pretty consistent moral good across many religions, and seems to be held in common by most atheists as well, yourself included.
Richard Dawkins wrote this book called The Selfish Gene, and
Yes.
a lot of people don't understand. They just read from the title what they imply what it means, but what it actually means is that, if you and I are brothers, we're siblings, and you have a family and I don't, and I throw my life on the line to defend you and your children.
Right.
To allow you to physically gather your children. I face the Smilodon knowing that it will kill me, but you run.
Right.
And half of my genes are in you.
Right. Right.
So mathematically, again, when you look at the population level, my genes are going to survive in you, even if I physically myself don't survive.
If I remember correctly, the point that he's making, just to summarize it and summarize what the point that you're making here, is that it's about the preservation of the genes themselves, not necessarily on an individual biological, like an individual organism basis, but the general pattern within that population. And the nature of the genes needing to preserve themselves results in all of these kinds of altruistic behaviors. Is that correct?
Yes, and it's funny how religion will often will take a beautiful message and distort or conceal it. Right. Like, one of the things that we're talking about here is what Spock said, Star Trek movie number 3. Where the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. Right. Well, some people take that as being a very poisonous message. I don't know how they distort it that way, but the same people will send you to your recruiter to praise the value of you laying down your life for your country. Well, how the hell is that any different?
It's a contradiction. Absolute contradiction. Absolutely. So now getting back to the topic of God, as well as good and bad and morality, is the God of the Bible good or bad? Kind of a broad question here.
Yeah.
Can go off in so many directions, but just off the top of your head, is the God of the Bible good or bad?
The Bible, the Bible God, is a horrific monster.
Horrific monster.
Horrific
based
monster.
upon what?
There's nothing good about the God of the Bible. It's selfish and vindictive, and it penalizes for the worst imaginable crimes. It doesn't judge you on what you actually do. Instead, you're being penalized for thought crimes. And just like any imaginary being, the whole thing is whether you believe. That's all that this matters, right? So you are judged. You will go to heaven or hell as decided not by what good you did or how evil you were. That's a complete fable. In the Christian perspective, now this may be true in Judaism, but in the Christian perspective, you are damned or you are saved based on your belief, not your deeds. And there's some argument about whether it's faith, whether it's acts, but it says your good deeds are like filthy rags.
That is true. It
If
does
you
say
do
that.
right. So all sins can be forgiven if you but believe. So it doesn't matter how evil you are, you'll still get into heaven if you just profess your belief. That's it. You just have to believe. And then at the same time, if you don't believe, then it doesn't matter how good you are, because the only sin that will not be forgiven is the sin of disbelief. So gullibility is the sole criteria for redemption, because Jesus said, to Thomas, he said, okay, well, you've seen evidence and you believed, but blessed is he who has not seen
And yet believes.
and yet believed. Because that's what it's all about. You're supposed to believe impossible nonsense for no good reason. Believe me, because I said so. Kill every man and his brother. Immediately after saying, thou shalt not kill. But then, who's the one brother that was a problem?
Moses' brother, apparently.
That's the one brother that doesn't get killed.
Right.
And suddenly, in the next page, he's got priestly robes. Bejeweled with emeralds. The fuck happened there?
Right.
That's what happens when those who have the power make the rules. And those men who are in charge make up their own stories. And I'm not saying that Moses was in charge and Moses made up his own stories. I'm saying that Jewish people made up these stories to shut everybody else up and keep them in line.
Right.
Because there was never a Moses, there was never an Aaron. But you know what's really important about that story? Is how God needed Noah to build him an ark. And he gave specific instructions on how to build his tabernacle, and he gave specific instructions on how his priests were supposed to be adorned, right? Why is it that God can create planets and dinosaurs and everything that humans can't make, but God can't create anything humans can make. He can't make a box or a boat or a building.
He needs people to do that.
Yeah, and he needs people to reward the guys who gave the law. You know, well, we talk to God, and God says you need to give us a bunch of emeralds and virgins.
Bring it all. There's no ulterior motives here. None at all.
Absolutely, and so we have the first faith healers. So if you think that the modern day faith healers are a scam, and if you don't yet realize that the modern faith healers are a scam, you need to catch up to the learning curve. But if you if you realize that modern faith healers are a scam, just look at the rest of the religious community. There's no one exempted. And here's the biggest issue that I have with the whole God thing. People that go to church, for me, the only value any information can have is however accurate you can show it to be. So if I go to church and you're going to tell me anything about who God is or what he wants or any of that, you have to also be able to show that what you're saying is correct.
Right.
If you can't show that anything that you said is correct, it's an empty assertion. And if you're going to tell me anything and there's no way that you can show that what you said is right, it's wrong. Period.
Exactly.
It's automatically dismissed. If you can't verify that anything that you just said, you're done. And everything, I can dismiss everything you just said as being made up. Because doesn't made up also mean wrong?
Yes.
Don't we criticize people when they start talking about things, when they just assert as fact things that they don't know to be true, right? When then you realize, well, you don't even know what you're talking about. Well, just because they sound confident doesn't mean that they're right. And how often do we realize that you don't know what you do? You sound confident, you certainly act like you know, but you don't know. So you're wrong. It could be, roll of the dice, that whatever you just made up might have been correct. But we don't give you that benefit of the doubt. If you're talking about auto mechanics or politics or whatever the fuck the circumstance is, whatever subject you're talking about, if you can't show that what you're saying is right, we automatically discount you.
Exactly.
Why are there different rules for religion where nobody knows what the hell they're talking about?
So, in wrapping up, I've got one other question for you, and this one's a little, it's broad. It's a broad question, and feel free to take any issue with any words in this question. Is there any basis for an objective morality?
Yes, in the sense that if we understand what morality is, and that definition of morality doesn't depend on a God, right?
Yes.
That it's not, the morality as God, whatever's inconsistent with God or whatever. As long as you have it, if you could understand what morality is with or without a God, then we can measure that. We can objectively measure that morality against the God. Right. In which case, I say that the biblical God at least always fails. People will say that different societies have different norms. Okay, well, you want to get into the weeds on any of it. We understand that if in any country in the world, in any society in this world, if I decide to pull out a machete and hack any one of you to death for no reason, or if I have a reason, right? He doesn't believe the same way I do. He believes in Keynesian economics. What the fuck? Well, who cares? I hack somebody to death. That's still criminal. Every society.
Right. There's not a society on this planet, even primitive Amazonian societies that don't have a prohibition against that kind of murderous behavior.
Even if it's not murderous, uninvited violence.
Yes.
For reasons that can't be justified universally through every other society. So there is an objective standard there, and oddly enough, the very people who say that there is no objective morality are arguing for religious standards, where one religion will permit something that societies would never permit except in the case of religion.
That's
because
great point.
Religion makes up strange rules that violate everything about humanity, right? So we can kill the unbeliever on the word of one or two witnesses.
Just one or two.
Oh, they don't agree with me. Kill them. Or they have a different perspective or a different interpretation. Heresy, heretics, what is it, apostasy. We must murder them all.
Right.
Only religion would come up with daft rules like that because religion is objectively immoral.
That's a great point, and I think I'd just like to wrap it up there. Aron, thank you so much for joining me today
my
on
pleasure,
Atheist
sir.
Edge. And for theists and atheists out there, I hope this addressed some issues and opened up the topic of morality for you so that you consider more deeply your position on it. Again, thank you so much for joining us today on Atheist Edge. I'm Sam. Cheers.
Atheist Edge with Sam and Jim. Walking the edge of what some consider offensive. But your feelings don't matter here, only facts. Edgy commentary on the dangers of doctrine, the foibles of faith, the bullshit of belief, the stupidity of superstition, and the idiocy of indoctrination. With razor-sharp wit, curiosity, and critical thought, we take an unblinking look at today's religions. We are Atheist Edge.